tell us about who you are and what you do?
Well, my name is Josh Listen. I work in Shaker Heights as a police officer. Been doing it for about 4 years. Prior to my law enforcement career, I was in the United States Marine Corps for about 4.5 years. Did one combat tour overseas and one non-combat tour. I'm married with a son. That's about it.
What made you become a police officer?
A couple of different things. So when I was younger, I never really liked the police, just to be frank. Grew up in the inner city, Cleveland, 4th District to be exact. And a lot of stuff that I saw from the police officers I didn't like. So I made it a point when I grew up, I'd probably go into law enforcement in some shape or form and try to be the change within, the profession. So other kids don't have the same mindset that I had growing up.
You said when you were younger you didn't like the police. Why is that?
Well, a lot of stuff that I saw, police citizen interaction, didn't like how they spoke to us and dealt with us, you know what I mean? And a lot of that has to do with the departments not mirroring the community that the police. So a lot of inner city departments, metro areas, have police officers that know nothing about the people that live in those areas, nor the culture and just their way of living. And that has a lot to do with how you interact with somebody. If you don't know them, you don't know their culture, you don't understand it, and you don't want to understand it. So those different things you face today at police work.
How important is culture in regards to policing the neighborhood?
I believe it's very important. Like I said before, police officers I believe the police department should mirror the community that they serve. The only problem with that is we don't have a lot of people who want to become police officers because of different negative stigmas and things that they've seen within the profession, which is understandable. But we also have to think on the other side of that. If we ever want to see change within our neighborhoods where our families are growing up and where we have grown up, we have to become a part of this profession so we can institute change and implement change by us being, directly involved. If we never get involved and keep, turning, our heads to these problems. And
So what if I wanted to become a police officer? What should I do and what shouldn't I do?
yeah, you just never want to get arrested. A bunch of movement violations because you're going to be driving a city-owned vehicle. They have to insure you. If they can't insure the driver or the police officer because they don't feel that they're trustworthy and a safe driver, then that hinders you. Also, good credit. You don't want to be in a massive amount of debt. They look at all of that. Your debt. They look at in school. They look at your conduct all the way back to high school, the transcripts, your grades, and then what they're doing is they're judging your character. So if you were this person back in high school and you made a couple of mistakes along the way, so like you just want to be truthful. You want to minimize the infractions in school, like suspensions, and even as a juvenile, you don't want a lot of things on your record because they go back and look at that. And if they can develop a pattern, a lot of the time you'll wash yourself out of the candidate pool of being considered for the job, because they'll say, well, if he did this at 18, at 21, 22, I don't think he probably changed. Not everybody's going to judge you like that, but some people will. So,
What is the best thing about being a cop and what is the worst thing about being a cop?
so for me, like I said, getting police work, I did it for, if you will, the culture of my people, because we don't see a lot of black people in a position like this of power and heavy influence. And I believe that as a black police officer, you can have an impact on those that look like you, primarily in a positive way. And I always make it a point to speak to kids of color and interact with them from the smallest thing of, hey, how you doing, what you up to, just so they can recognize me as a human being and not just a police officer. I don't want to be Josh the cop, I just want to be, a regular dude to them so they can see that I'm human and that I'm not just here to arrest people. The worst part about it is that I do have to arrest people, but I gotta uphold the law. That's what I swore to do. And a lot of times I'm arresting people that look like me. So that's the worst part. Every time I pretty much pull out the bracelets, it's for somebody who looks like me.
What is the youngest person you arrested and why?
Remember, they were around 15 or 16 16 years old. And the reason why we arrested them is because they had stolen, first off, they had broken into a resident of Shaker Heights' home and held them at gunpoint, stealing things, took the keys to their vehicle and ran from the police. And ultimately they were arrested for a slew of charges.
And when someone gets pulled over, what are some ways they could use? What are some things they can use to de-escalate the situation?
I always tell people, like, you know, when you get pulled over by the police, you just want to keep your hands in plain view. That puts the officer at ease. You always want to have your hands in plain view so that officer knows that you got, you know, I can see your hands, that means you can access the weapon without me knowing. A lot of times people run into problems when they don't want to keep their hands in plain view. You don't want to get out the car when traffic stop, when you get pulled over, and try to walk up on the police car and talk to them. Because like I said, that startles a lot of police officers, especially at night, when it's unknowns. I can't see into the vehicle. I can barely see you 9 times out of 10. And if you do have to step out of the vehicle for whatever reason, just keep your hands in plain view. Don't stick your hands in your pockets, moving around, quick motions and movements. Startles police officers.
If there was one thing you could tell the youth of my generation, what would it be?
I would just say that you know, your parents doing the best that they can to make do and get you by and provide a nice living to you. For you to go out and do things like, you know, from petty theft on to stealing vehicles and robbing people, it's gonna make life that much harder for you. And you always want to consider somebody's doing that to your parents or your family. How would you feel? It pays off to keep a clean slate. And like I said, for those that want to get into law enforcement, you cannot have anything on your record. Even small tickets can hinder you from a job. So it pays off in the long run, so you can be a productive member of society. You know, going to prison and having that track record that'll be with you for the rest of your life, and you don't want that. So
what are some things that we, when I say we, I mean as an organization, as educators, as leaders in the community, what are some things that we can do to bridge the gap between the police officers and just the youth in the community? Because a lot of times our youth are afraid of police officers, you know, and it's not even because they have themselves encountered a police officer, but maybe because their parents have, their grandparents have, and so that fear is translated through the generation. So what are some things, some practical things that we can do as community leaders, as educators, to kind of like bridge that gap?
as a police officer, I make it a point when I go out in the community, I'm not just out there to write tickets and arrest people and all that. It's a community policing type deal, the thing that I do. So when I'm out in the neighborhood patrolling as a patrol officer, I make it a point to wave at the elders, wave at the community members that's walking. Hey, how you doing? Have a nice day. What you doing today? Small talk that can develop that relationship. You know, community policing, we call it. So a lot of people don't take the time out to do it because it makes them uncomfortable. And small talk maybe, you know, it just isn't their thing. But as a police officer, I think it's part of our job to do that, especially the climate of the country that's, you know, right now, the tensions are high, and we need to build that relationship. Like I said, bridging the gap, we need to like find a common ground. So I worked in Cleveland Heights prior to coming to Shaker Heights, and we used to have coffee with a cop on a certain day during the week. I think it was once a month. So just come to have coffee or whatever, you can bring me a juice, whatever, and just have that open conversation, even if it's uncomfortable, about whatever you want to talk about. That's the first step. You got to be able to communicate. If you can't communicate, if every topic is going to make you uncomfortable and not want to talk, that's the first step, and that's the first thing that we need to, that barrier that we need to break down. If we can't have a conversation, we'll never be able to, you know, even come to common ground, to even just agree to disagree. You know what I'm saying? It's not to persuade somebody one way or another, just to come to a common ground and an understanding of how somebody feels. You may not, you know know something. We can just exchange knowledge, you know what I'm saying, information. But if everybody says that racism and this and that is uncomfortable, then that's the first problem, because it's alive and well, we got to address it. So
Absolutely. And before we end, I think Caleb has asked you all of the questions that I think are very important. As you stated, for our youth, you know, that want to become police officers or work in any fields in law enforcement.
Thank you for taking time out your day to come and interview me. And maybe we'll use that coffee with a cop idea.
My pleasure, my man.